All right. Friendly reminder, you have a 35-question test on Friday. 35 questions covering the other half of APGov. Then you'll be picking up your last packet for AP Comparative on Friday. It's actually 2 packets. It's really not that bad. So the eye rolling and the shocked face, kind of unnecessary. But maybe we could move through that. With that being said, you'll pick up your last packet. These are your last 2 major assignments. You will have essays, of course, but it's really not going to be as heavy as we kind of clean up content. And then we're done. With that being said, friendly reminder, a week from Saturday, we'll be together. I know, I'm looking forward to it. Actually, less than you are, if you could possibly imagine. You have a Saturday exam on April 22nd. It is worth 200 points, so it is something that cannot be ignored. It is next Saturday. You need to be at the cafeteria at 7:45. It will start promptly at 8 o'clock. I will have you starting your test by 8:09. You people will be done by like 10:30, because your exam is not that hard. 10:30, 11. You will leave while you are watching AP World Kids starting their DBQs for the next hour and a half. So, yeah. So, my sympathies for you are pretty minimal. Their lives will be significantly worse, and you will hear their test is changing real quick. Their timing is fast, and they have the same amount of questions you do, and then they go into short answer questions, then they get a little break, and then they're going. So, I'm also scoring all of your essays, and we'll have them all back to you. So your 3 hours maybe that you are with me translates into 20 plus hours for me. Yes? So your exam is on Saturday, April 22nd. If you cannot be there for a legitimate reason, then you need to discuss with me, and we'll talk about your makeups, Caesar.
So we have both classes. Do we do it?
You're going to do the makeup of APGov, because AP World will take you 4 hours. So APGov you'll make up. If you look on your little half sheet, Caesar, you already have the makeup times on your little half sheet. So you'll come and make those up. That starts next week. So that is happening. Questions? Perfect. Let's do it then. Civil liberties and civil rights is what we're talking about today. On the top of your notes, let's do it. I will tell you, this is, I think this is very confusing stuff. So I'm going to try to be as clear and as articulate as I possibly can, kind of going forward. This will absolutely be on your AP exam in some sort of fashion. Some things I'm not sure about, but these things are always on your exam. So, what is the difference between a civil liberty and a civil right? A civil liberty are rights that need protection from the government. So these are things that are written down in our Constitution that protect us from the government, okay? That limit the government's power. Who can raise their hand and give me an example from the Constitution, aka an amendment, typically, that protects us specifically from the government? Jimmy?
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech is a civil liberty. We are allowed to criticize the government. We're also allowed to hear criticisms of the government in order for us to be more educated. Absolutely. Grant. Second Amendment. We're allowed to have guns so we can beat the government. Which seems crazy. Here we go. No search and seizure. Actually, one of my favorite ones. I think that one is actually one of the best ones we got there. I think if you are aware of the criminal court cases and stuff like that, that is a huge one that they use all the time. So, civil liberties protect us from the government. From the government. It stops government overreach. Now, make a little note like that. That's a nice little clarity point there. Civil rights are rights that need protection by the government. We need the government to help us make sure everyone has equal access. Everyone is treated fairly. We see this in 2 ways, typically. Actually, you can see it in 3 different ways. The first way is, of course, through our amendments. Which amendment is civil rights tied, Brooklyn? When in doubt, if you're talking about amendment, which one should you throw down? 14th Amendment is a universal. It's actually both a civil liberty and a civil right. It's both of them. That's how universally used the 14th Amendment is. So if you don't know if it's a civil liberty or civil right, which one should you write down? 14th. It is literally the only one. Okay? So the 14th Amendment is a civil right. What is another civil right one? What do you got, Katie? Give me a guess. Huh? The 6th is actually a civil liberty because it's about hearings. I think that one's speedy trial. What do we got, Britt?
19th.
19th Amendment, because what is the 19th Amendment?
It's like women can vote.
It's kind of like what, yeah, dude. Yeah, hard fought, thanks. Women get the right to vote in the 19th Amendment, absolutely. That's civil right. 13th Amendment is also a civil right. We're going to get into which ones are and which ones aren't here in a second. But yes, so civil liberties are stopping government overreach. Civil rights are when the government is used to create an equality. Do we see the difference between the two? Because we're going to add a lot more complication. Okay. Oh, can you take out your Supreme Court cases? Because I'm referencing 4 of them today. Take out your Supreme Court cases, please. Yeah, the packet. Yeah, I don't need. Have you filled it out yet? So you have a long weekend ahead of you, yes? Yeah? Is it happening now? Yeah. Good. You're taking out your Supreme Court cases, yeah. What? You okay? It's due on Friday. A long week. I said week. I meant week. Can a girl make a mistake? Have I been on my game today, as you've already spent an hour with me today? Am I on it today, or am I a little off? Oh, your lies are sweet. David, well, in 8th period, I don't have time for anything else. Sure, David. Let's, absolutely. We've got nothing going on here. We're not talking about a major cornerstone of your exam. Sure. Please, help yourself. Civil liberties, ladies and gentlemen, are protections against government actions. Most of these are found in the Bill of Rights. Most of these are found in the Bill of Rights. Make sure you write that down. Okay, the First Amendment is going to be, of course, the biggest one because it's all of your freedoms. Okay, so freedom of religion is your first major civil liberties. By the way, I'm only discussing civil liberties until I clearly tell you I'm discussing civil rights. Is everyone clear? Hello? So make sure you label. These are civil liberties very clearly. And then I will transition to civil rights and we'll make sure we have a clear distinction. The First Amendment includes religion, freedom of religion. It is created by the Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause talks about how the government cannot prefer one religion over another. Who is the founding father who was really all about separation of church and state? We talk about him all the time. Desmond. It's not Hamilton, actually. It's the other one we talk about all the time. Grant. No. Damn it. Maybe we don't talk about this guy as much. Because you're not wrong. We do talk about Madison a lot, too. Who is it, Sophie? It's Jefferson. Jefferson is all about separation of church and state. You should know that. Okay? Now, when we're talking about Jefferson, we're talking about religion. It is all about the Establishment Clause. It's all about separation of church and state. And there is also a Supreme Court case. Which Supreme Court case is all about religion? Flip through and look at it. It works better if you actually fill in some of this, because some of this you've had for 2 weeks now. Board. Oh, the Yoder case is definitely a religion. It allows them to use their religion, but actually not the one I'm referencing, but you're the first one to bring that up today, so thank you. But not the one I was referring to, but it is a religion case. What do you got, Caitlin? Engel versus Vitale is the case I am referring to, and that is about religion. It's about a non-denominational prayer. Jake, what does non-denominational mean? You typically see it as like non-denominational churches, non-denominational chapels. It's typically how you see it. Do you know what that means? Help them out. Jack.
It's not specific, but
yeah, it's not a specific church for Catholicism. It's not a Lutheran. It's not a Baptist. It's not a Protestant. It is just a faith church. So you can go in there and pray to Allah, to pray to Vishnu, who is the Hindu god, or you can pray to Jesus if you want to. It doesn't matter who you're praying to. In Engel versus Vitali, it is about a school requiring a non-denominational prayer. So they weren't preferring one religion over another. They were just having a prayer to whatever God you wanted. Are you allowed to do that, Brennan? No. Okay, in Engel versus Vitali, it gets voted down. Why? Kind of, Desmond? It's the Establishment Clause, is that there is no way that a single religion at all could be benefited, or religion itself should be supported by a public funded component. So you should make a note of that in your box here, people. So, when we're talking about freedom of religion, when we talk about Establishment Clause, which is what Vitali versus Engel is all about, it means no public religious displays. So, supposed to, according to the Constitution, there is no supposed to be specific religious decorations or supports toward one religion over another. There is no prayer allowed in public schools that is organized by the schools. Now, if a bunch of students get themselves together and prayer on campus, is that okay? Yes, because it's organized by the and it's by the choice of the but if Samantha Bennett's like, oh my God, guys, let's get together right before class every single day and pray, is that okay? Hell no, that is not okay and is absolutely not appropriate in a public school. Okay? Public funding for religious schools can't be done. Polygamy is also banned by establishment. So there you go, in case you were wondering. Patriotism and school attendance. If you are a Hindu and you miss school for one of the holidays, you can't be punished for it. That's what we're referring to for school attendance. What do you got?
Will that work for like the 5 absence thing?
You can't be held accountable for a religious thing. So like Yom Kippur, we officially do not have off as a school district, but if you are a practicing Jew and you do, you get to have the day off and you're not held accountable for it. You get marked absent, but you're not held accountable for it because it's a religious observance. Does that make sense? All right. You're still in the First Amendment. You have freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Now, the whole reason why we have freedom of speech and freedom of the press is to ensure that we have access to information that the government doesn't want us to, and that allows us to hear negative information about the government. To allow us to have less censorship as possible. Now, when we talk about freedom of the speech and freedom of the press, it's actually one of the most defended components. Right now, there is a huge lawsuit going on against Fox News from Dominion Voting Systems. They're suing Fox News for $1 billion. And it's going to court next week over slander and libel. Fox News, on its airwaves, has said that the election was stolen because of the Dominion voting machines. So they are being sued by Dominion because Dominion says they did not steal the elections, all the votes were counted correctly, and because of slander and libel, they have lost billions of dollars and billions of contracts across the United States. With that being said, because of this court case, they have gotten the text messages between the hosts of their most popular shows, like Tucker Carlson, Waters, what's his name? Jesse Waters, isn't that the guy? And then you have Hannity. They have the text messages between them, and in the text messages that have been released in the court case that has gone through and will be on public trial next week, they have said, Tucker Carlson and Hannity have said in their personal text messages to each other that the election was not stolen, that Trump is lying about this. How is he getting away with this? But what were they saying on air? That it was stolen. So this is being used as evidence to go against. Now, what do you think Fox News is using as a defense? Yeah, freedom of speech. That they are being protected. They are saying that they have the right to present any information they want. So this is a huge deal that will be decided in the courts starting next week. Tucker Carlson is going to be standing on trial. Hannity is going to the stand. Who's the blonde chick? I can't remember her name. Who goes on right before Hannity? Anyway, they'll all be taking the trial and defending both their on-air presentation of content and their private text messages, which is like super scandalous. Have you heard about this? No? It's like a huge thing. It's like $1 billion. If Fox News loses, it will legitimately change Fox News completely and utterly. Already since this lawsuit's been filed, the comments that they have made about the 2020 election have already been systemically have changed. Like, huge deal. They have produced, it's a thing. And it's all about slander and libel, which are not covered under freedom of press. You have to, if you're going to say something, it has to be true. You can't just spew lies. It has to be true. If you say something that's wrong about someone else, that's slander. If you write it down or you post it in a message on the internet, it's known as libel, and you can be sued heavily for it. Now, when we talk about freedom of the press, freedom of speech, what court case is the big one that we have studied? Alex, what's the big court case for freedom of the press? Well, why don't we take a more active role? We could be working on this since you've had it for 2 weeks, and it's also a newspaper, probably the most famous newspaper in the country. Caitlin. New York Times versus United States. Here we go. So, freedom of the press, freedom of speech has already been tested. It's been tested like all the damn time. New York Times versus the United States is the most famous one. Nick, what's that court case about?
New York Times, one of the first ones.
Yes, that's usually what freedom of the press is about. You mean the U.S. didn't want them to? The president specifically, in regards to what? Brennan, help him out. Huh? Pentagon Papers. And what are the Pentagon Papers, Brennan? What was the big secret? It is about the Vietnam War. What's the big secret about the Vietnam War? No, that's not that wasn't the scandal of the Pentagon. But everything else is correct. Desmond.
How they could have just not done the war, but the presidents didn't want to be the person to say.
There you go. Okay, so the Pentagon Papers, you should probably write this down, Alex, if you couldn't recall it. Pentagon Papers are all about how U.S. presidents, the last 3 of them, Nixon was the last, Johnson and Kennedy, they were losing the war and they knew they couldn't win, but what did they keep doing? They kept sending boys because they didn't want to be the losing president. Is that a good reason to send men off to war to die? No, of course not. So the New York Times got the Pentagon Papers. They wanted to publish the Pentagon Papers, and Nixon got word of it, and he squashed it. They took him to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in whose favor, David? The New York Times. They got to print the paper. Now, of course, Nixon is going to say that this is all about national security. So they said that freedom of the press was more important than national security. But they did have to hide some things and remove some things. So they did check to make sure it wasn't putting American lives in danger by posting some of this. But all this stuff is backdated about 15, 20 years and redacted. So keep that in mind. Okay. Freedom of the press. It is all of that. Perfect. New York Times, you need to know. Also, another one that is freedom of the press. There's 2 Supreme Court cases you need to know. Is Tinker versus Des Moines. That is your second one that you should have known. Tinker versus Des Moines is about what, Katie? Yeah, they're wearing armbands in protest of what war? The Vietnam War. Were they allowed to do it or not allowed to do it by the Supreme Court, Emily? Tinker wins. So are they allowed to wear the bands or not?
Yeah.
They are allowed to wear the bands. So Tinker versus Des Moines says, and this is the important part for you, that students Students are allowed to protest at school as long as it does not disrupt the school day. So if you wanted to protest gun violence by shaking, I don't know, rattles around all day, would that protest be allowed? I don't know, I was trying to find something that wasn't like scary and like popping. So if we heard popping outside, wouldn't we all be terrified? Yeah, American 2023. Huh?
An air horn.
Air horn, that, oh god, I hate those freaking things. Air horn would be terrifying as well. However, you can protest as long as it is not disruptive to the day. It is all about armament and students protesting. That's Tinker versus Des Moines. Okay. Freedom of assembly. We are still in first one. It is all about peaceful assembly, which means you can unify and protest and do the things. Now, in most places, you have to have a permit. Why do you have to ask for a permit? This is a big topic of conversation. Jimmy, why do you think you need to have a permit in order to do a protest?
So they know that you're protesting peacefully.
To a degree. Or, especially if you're going to have large groups of people protesting, it allows the protesters to be safe and the public to be safe, correct? Keep in mind that asking for a permit before a large demonstration is not an infringement on your constitutional right. Now, if no one is granted a permit, then that is an infringement on your constitutional rights. Do we see the difference? Okay. Now, if Jimmy was very passionate about a topic and wanted to go protest the school board, and it was just Jimmy, does he need a permit for that? No. But if Jimmy and 700 of his closest friends are going to stand outside the school board, does he have to have a permit for that? Yes. Okay. Now, petition is also a part of the First Amendment. Petition means that you can challenge the government's authority if you feel it is to be unjust. So just because the government does something doesn't mean you have to accept it. You can challenge it. And that is something we do hear very frequently. Can we agree? Hello? Yeah, we sue the government all the time. Okay, this week there's tons of controversy spewing, and states all around the country are suing the federal government. All right, Second Amendment. Of course, we know all about the Second Amendment. Okay, the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Okay, this is a civil liberty. We're supposed to be able to protect ourselves from the government's reaches. Okay. Now, there are 2 Supreme Court cases that involve guns. One of them uses interstate, so it's not really a Second Amendment right. The other one is a Second Amendment right. Which one is a Second Amendment rights issue? Sophia? McDonald versus Chicago. Write it down. McDonald versus Chicago is your Second Amendment right. This is saying that even if a city bans guns and you want a gun in your home to protect your home, you're able to have a gun. So, that the Second Amendment is more important than the city codes, essentially. Now, if you love what's happening right now with how many guns there are in the United States and the access to guns and the ability to carry guns pretty much anywhere at this point, then the amendment that supports you the most is the Second Amendment, but which court case has opened up gun ownership here in the United States? McDonald versus Chicago has been the big one. If you hate where the United States is right now with guns, and how common it is to see guns and have access to guns, then the court case you hate the most is McDonald versus Chicago. Alright, what is the other court case about guns, Jimmy?
United States versus Russia.
There you go. Well, that one's all based on what? Commerce Clause in order to ban guns from school zones. So, they're trying to use it. Why did they go after school zones, Britt? Why did they use the interstate commerce to get to school zones?
That's one about like interstate commerce is like when they regulate food, right?
Yes. And who has that power? Who has the authority?
Congress does.
Congress does. So why did they use the interstate commerce with guns?
To say that they have control of that school zones.
There you go. It was the only way that Congress could try to mitigate, and what happened to it, Annie? Did it pass or did it die? Who won, the states or the federal government? Who won, Annie? The states win. So, school zones are not protected under interstate commerce. They said it was an infringement on states' rights. Now, am I telling you right now that you can bring a gun here to Plain High School? Absolutely not. States have passed laws to ban guns from campuses, school campuses. Everyone clear on that? So don't go home and be like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of sad. Okay? But it's not supported by the federal government. Third Amendment is the quartering of troops. That's try to keep our privacy away from the government. Okay? Fourth Amendment is search and seizures. That is illegal collection of information. Keep that in mind. Now, as a student at Plain High School, do you actually are in complete control over your property? No, absolutely not. If Miss Hellenberg comes in this room right now and says she wants to open your bag, does she have access to it? Yes, she does, because your parents signed over the authority to the school board. So, can Miss Hallenberg come in and look in my purse? I actually don't know. I don't know.
Did you sign that form?
I did not sign it. I mean, there's nothing in my purse.
Can I search lockers?
I probably have a bunch of crumbled up goldfish bags in there. Anyway. Your locker is not protected, and neither is your car. If you park your car on campus, they have the right to access your car. You don't know, not a constitutional law.
Because you like paid for lockers.
I'm not even gonna move
You
that
don't
far
own it, the
away.
school is rented. It's not ownership. Alright, Fourth Amendment, you need to know, unlawful arrest as well. They can't just hold you and cannot keep you from charging. So, in other countries, you are guilty until proven innocent. Here in the United States, you are still proven guilty. So they can just throw you in a jail. Thailand is super famous for this. Thailand, if you go to Thailand and they think you have drugs on you, okay, they can just throw you in jail and you can sit there for months before you see a judge to even file that, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. And you can just sit there and sit there and sit there. Do you think governments abuse this power? Yes, of course, because they're going to throw you in. France is like the home of this. France would just throw you in jail and then find a crime that you committed. Here in the United States, you cannot be put in jail until you have been found guilty of a crime, so it's a reversal of what had been happening in France. So, when you go to other countries, you should know the law code. At least the basic frameworks. Or don't do anything stupid. That would also work too. Search and seizures, perfect. Fifth Amendment are protections for those who are accused of crime, like no double jeopardy. Think about it. If our government wanted to frame Caesar for murder, he gets off on one case of murder, and then they charge him again for the same one, and they're just going to keep him tied up in court. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a bad thing. In some countries, they do that. They continually charge the same crimes over and over again until Caesar has no financial ability to pay for a lawyer, and eventually he's just going to go to jail because they won't be able to defend themselves. Here in the United States, we have no double jeopardy. Okay, the Sixth Amendment is a speedy trial. I was just talking to you what happens in like places like Thailand, for instance, where they can lock you up in jail for a bit. One of the worst prisons in the world. Alex, you are so rude. Take your phone away. Okay, Seventh Amendment. By the way, you haven't been able to answer any of my questions today, so maybe you should put the phone down, yeah? Seventh Amendment means that it has to be within limitation of fines. Eighth is no excessive bails or fine or no unusual punishments. Seven is like federal courts can't charge too much. Because France, once again, used to also charge crazy amounts of fines. If you can't pay the fines, then you go to jail. So lots of people are in jail just because they can't pay fines. Eighth Amendment is no cruel and unusual punishment. 9 and 10 are reserved powers of the government. that even if the rights aren't specifically mentioned, if they're in theory of, then it is protected. 10 is reserved power that guarantees that the federal government is protecting to the state and the people. So it's checking on powers. Remember, who wanted the Bill of Rights in the first place, Alice? Who wanted it? At the Constitutional Convention, who is arguing for the Bill of Rights? You're so close. It's they're not federalists, they're anti-federalists wanted, because the anti-federalists did not believe in a central government. They thought they would be corrupt, so that's how we got them to sign it. Okay, due process is the biggest thing that you need to know about liabilities, about civil liabilities. It is all about due process. What is due process, Jake? When I say due process to you, what does that mean? Alex, help him out.
You have the right to go through like all the steps of being tried for something.
Yeah, of course. Due process means that you have the right to clear your name. Okay, if someone accuses you of a crime, are you immediately guilty or you get to prove yourself? Prove yourself, and that's what due process is. So, due process is the act of clearing your name and proving your innocence. Okay, here in the United States, you are given, granted, and protected in due process by the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. That is what makes the United States special. Okay, when we talk about due process, it's the ability to go ahead and deal with it. Now, when we talk about the 14th Amendment is the only one that is both a civil liberty and a civil right. It is both. It is the most universal of the amendments. If they ask you a question and you have no idea what the answer is, it's probably, there you go. So, when you talk about the 14th Amendment ensures that the Bill of Rights is then expanded to states, and it makes states' responsibility to protect your Bill of Rights. Keep that in mind. So, the 14th Amendment makes it a state requirement, not just a federal government, to protect your Bill of Rights, which is why all of these are technically civil liberties and civil rights. Alright, skip a space, center it. These are civil rights. So we are done with civil liberties, we're transitioning to civil rights. Civil rights means we need the government to ensure equality. The government has to step up to ensure equal opportunity. Okay? Now, you're going to be shocked to hear this. People have been discriminated against in the United States. Are we shook right now? Is this shocking news to us? African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, Mexican Americans, and women have faced this absolute aspects of American society that have discriminated against them. So, our government, in its ever-looking search to achieve its goal of equality, has created equal protection of the law. Write it down, under the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was put into law after what event, Emerson? What American event puts the 14th Amendment on the books? It's like a thing, like a big thing. It's ran in 1867.
Oh, 1867.
Yeah, it's after what event?
The Civil
Yeah,
War.
yeah, it's after the Civil War. So it is going to grant former slaves equality in the laws, yes? Now, the 14th Amendment gives equality. The 13th Amendment, which was written in 1866, does what, Britt? There you go, abolishes slavery. So the 13th Amendment is also a civil right because it does abolish slavery. But it's the 14th Amendment that we talk about all the damn time because the 14th Amendment has the Equal Protection Clause. The Equal Protection Clause is what makes the 14th Amendment so damn usable. Because it is the equal protection Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment that is used to give women their rights. It is used to give equality of voting. And if you are going to fight in court and you are trying to show that someone's screwing you over, what are you going to use? The Equal Protection Clause. Okay. Here we go. Other civil rights you need to know. You need to know, of course, the 13th Amendment, which we just talked about. You also need to know the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Okay? Oops, sorry. 1866, which gives African Americans the basic rights to sue, own property, and be a witness in court. Now, in 1866, did we allow African Americans to stand as juries on trials in their own cases? No. That's not going to be fixed until the civil rights, but we'll deal with that in the 1960s. 1868, we have the 14th Amendment passed, and then we have the 15th Amendment passed. The 15th Amendment gives African American men the right to vote. So when we talk about the 14th Amendment and how it makes all men equal, did it actually make all men equal if we needed the 15th Amendment? What about the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote? Did the 14th Amendment actually do all the things it was supposed to do? No, because it wasn't doing those things, we had to pass more amendments. Okay, segregation. So, even after the 14th Amendment goes on the books, we still had racial discrimination here in the United States. 100 years later, we have to pass the Civil Rights Act in 1975. Okay. Anyway, we'll get there. Okay. Plessy v. Ferguson, you should be familiar with. Plessy v. Ferguson allows what to occur, David? No. Plessy v. Ferguson allows what to occur? Grant? It's not on the top ones. Ford, what is it?
Separate and equal.
It allows separate but equal, which will eventually be overturned by what court case, Brooklyn? It is one of your 15. Oh my goodness. Brooklyn has been in every history class you've ever taken. Alice. There you go. Plessy v. Ferguson will eventually be overturned by Brown v. Board of Education. Brown v. Board of Education ends segregation in schools and in public funded areas. It also begins to lay the foundation to stop discrimination based on race. So, after Brown v. Board of Education, then we get our modern Civil Rights Act. You absolutely need to know the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 1964 bans discrimination based on race, color, national origin, or sex in voting, employment, and public accommodations. This is when you actually start seeing equality. The fact that we are all in the same room together is the fact that we have civil rights in 1964. Because keep in mind, I wouldn't have been able to be your teacher prior to the 1950s, really, because women weren't allowed to teach higher education. You also need to know Women's Rights Act of 1965 is going to stop abuses of poll taxes and literacy tests. And then Civil Rights Act is going to try to stop discrimination in housing.
At this time, all seniors may be dismissed. Dave Knapp, the Panthers.
Okay, constitutional amendments that you do need to know that are based on the Constitution. So you need to know the 15th says you cannot discriminate on race. 19th, you cannot discriminate based on sex. 24th is poll tax. And 26th sets a minimum voting age of 18. So those are your amendments that you do need to know for voting. These are all civil rights. 24, which is poll tax. 18. Oh.
Where's the second last
24th is poll tax, 26th is 18. Is that what you needed, Nick? The last act is 1968.